Thank you, David, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So Cooper Metals is a young company. We're only 2.5 years old, and we're focused on copper and gold exploration. Our flagship project is in the Mount Isa region. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we have about 80 million shares on issue, a market cap of around $10 million. Importantly, we've got $4.4 million in the bank at the end of last quarter, and we're well supported by the Iwella Fund and Allow Resources Fund as well, which have around 13% collectively of our shares on issue. The board are well incentivised with around 7% of the shareholding. We have 3 projects, 2 in Queensland in the Mount Isa Inlier and 1 in WA, all focused on copper gold exploration. Next slide. So we've already heard quite a lot from John about how copper is critical for clean energy and how the price has been going up at a rapid rate of knots in the last 12 months or so. So I just draw your attention to also that there's been quite a lot of M&A activity, not only BHP's recent attempt at Anglo, but also locally in the Mount Isa area, where we've had Harmony Gold buy out Copper Mountain for about $230 million for the Eva deposit. And more recently, we've just had Carnaby do a deal with Hammer Metals for about $20 million on the Mount Hope project. And we're seeing increased JV activity as well. You've got Evolution Mining, which have the Ernest Henry mine. They've recently done an $8 million JV deal with a junior explorer near Cloncurry. Next slide. So there's 4 main key things I want to talk about initially with the Mount Isa East Copper Gold project. You can see the map there that we have quite a large tenement holding. You've got Mount Isa just there on the left-hand side, and all our tenements are within about 50 to 100 kilometres of Mount Isa there. And we have 1,600 square kilometres of tenure. I've highlighted the Carnaby Resources tenements there in yellow, just down to the south there, where they've announced over 20 million tonnes of ore in several deposits that have recently been discovered. So that shows you that the area is very highly prospective for copper gold mineralisation. It's a very strong mining district. There's a lot of infrastructure there. You've got Mount Isa Mines, of course. You've got Ernest Henry. You've got Eloise. You've got Mount Colin. So there's a lot of mining going on, and there's been mining there for over 100 years in the Mount Isa region. We believe that there's very strong exploration growth potential on our ground. We've identified in the last 2.5 years around 50 targets through a mixture of geophysical and geochemical prospecting. Next slide. Now, late last year, we did some drilling around our Brumby Ridge copper gold prospect, and we hit the spectacular 71 metres at 2.8% copper. Now, we followed that up earlier this year with some diamond and RC drilling. Now, the assay results are still pending for that, but we found that there was a well-mineralised parallel vein system there shown in pink. This is a plan here that you can see on the right-hand side. And there's these cross-cutting veins as well that are more in an east-westerly direction. So it's quite a complex vein system. The large intercepts that we got around 71 metres were in these cross-cutting veins, which are quite narrow. But what it does show is that it's a very fertile IOCG system in that area. So next slide. Next slide, you can see a section here through the Brumby Ridge copper gold prospect. And there's 2 main parallel veins shown in red, and there's that cross-cutting vein that you can see in white there. Now, there could be multiple of these cross-cutting veins. Their spatial extent is uncertain at this point, but I believe that it is evidence of a strong IOCG fertile system along the Brumby Ridge fault, and that Brumby Ridge fault does go for at least 25 kilometres. Next slide. Here's a geological map on the right. You can see the Brumby Ridge fault that I'm talking about running up through the centre of that map in a north-northwesterly direction. And there's quite a few copper gold prospects along that fault. And we're continuing to do prospecting along that fault, initially with our portable XRF, which is quite a rapid way to check for copper mineralisation and generate anomalies. And if those copper anomalies look good, then we move on to EM or IP on the ground to get those drill ready. So that work is ongoing at the moment. I've got a team in the field at the moment continuing that geochemistry through the area. And recently we've just drilled 4 prospects. We've done about 2,000 meters of RC. The assays are pending for that, and we should get those results later in the month. Next slide. Now, just talking about one of those prospects that we recently drilled, Matrix Sweat South. You can see that there's a geochemistry anomaly shown there in the plan. Now, that copper anomaly is about 500 meters long, 100 meters wide, and it's got a coincident VTEM anomaly. So VTEM is airborne EM. There's a shallow EM anomaly there. We did some initial drilling in 2023, and we got up to 65 meters at 0.34% copper in the oxide zone, and that hole finished in mineralization. So now we've done 3 more RC holes through that area, and we're testing deeper down, looking for a sulfide system, and also trying to extend that mineralization footprint. So assays will be out for that later this month. Next slide. Similarly, Matrix Sweats North, which is only about 700 meters along strike, has a coincident geochem and VTEM anomaly as well. Now, the geochem anomaly here is a lot longer. It's about 800 meters long. And we've just recently tested that with 4 RC holes for about 400 meters under some old workings, also into the VTEM anomaly and into the best part of the geochem anomaly. Next slide. Now, the Raven prospect is an interesting prospect. All these prospects are within 10 kilometers of each other, so it's like a cluster of copper gold prospects. I've got a geochemical plan that you can see here on the right of the copper anomalism. That's all portable XRF anomalism. We did some drilling into the Raven prospect late last year, and we got some economic intercepts, which were really encouraging, around 10 meters at 1.3% copper and about 0.17 grams per tonne gold. Now, Raven was discovered from a VTEM anomaly, so it was an airborne EM anomaly. There was no old workings here or anything. Raven has a little bit of pyrrhotite in it, which gives quite a good EM response. We did a downhole EM survey late last year, and that indicated that there was an off-hole conductor heading towards the southeast. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see here there's a long section. So the area that we drilled is shown in the red polygon there. We drilled that late last year in 2023. We hit the economic intercepts. The downhole EM showed an off-hole conductor, which is shown there in a pink polygon. And that's what we've just drilled in the last month. We've done 4 RC holes there for 600 meters, and those assays will be due out later this month. Next slide. Our Barbara East tenement, that's in the northern part of our tenement package, and it's near the Barbara deposit. Now, the Barbara deposit had around 5 million tonnes of copper gold ore in it at about 1.6% copper and some gold as well. Now, the Barbara deposit has an EM response, so it has a VTEM anomaly associated with it. So we got some government funding for a VTEM survey there in 2023. And significantly, that generated 10 anomalies that were really good. 3 of those anomalies are particularly good and have been modelled up by our geophysicist. Those 3 anomalies show that the anomalies start below surface, about 25 to 50 metres below surface. And we've been on the ground there. We've found some weak copper gold anomalies associated with those anomalies, and we'll be drilling those later this year as well. So that's a really exciting prospect. There's never been any VTEM done over this area before our survey. Next slide. So over the 2.5 years, we've generated around 50 targets. We're systematically working our way through our tenure. We're using a mixture of geophysics and geochemistry. Just last year, we did over 7,000 soil samples. We've done over 2,000 line kilometres of VTEM. So we've had a very active 2.5 years, and that's paying dividends now, generating a pipeline of targets for us to systematically test. And we have a big year in 2024 testing these targets. Next slide. Just shifting to our Aurindi project now, it's closer to Cloncurry. So it's near the Eloise mine, which has about 20 million tonnes of mined and remaining resources in it of copper gold. It's a very fertile area. We're looking for iron oxide copper gold and iron sulfide copper gold deposits. Next slide. Now, this shows a magnetic map on the left and a geology map on the right of the same area. You can see our tenements there shown in white, and we're really focusing on that prospective zone that you've got as a red outline. Now, that red outline shows a number of occurrences along there, the Jericho deposit, Eloise, etc. And Jericho itself was discovered by EM. So the next step here is an EM survey that we'll be doing later this year. And if we get a good EM anomaly, we'll be drill testing that one as well. Next slide. Just quickly on our Guru project in WA, it's not far from Silver Lake's Deflector mine. We've got 2 tenements there. In the last couple of years, we've been doing several phases of geochem surveys, and we've generated 5 gold anomalies. Next slide. Now, those 5 anomalies with the best result is a rock chip up to 2.56 grams per tonne gold. And all these anomalies are on a greenstone belt, which has had hardly any drilling in it. Quite a bit of these greenstone belt is undercover, so it hasn't had a lot of attention in the past. Now, we're just going through the regulatory processes at the moment. I've got a team right there at the moment doing some follow-up geochem and meeting the regulators on site. So we hope to be drilling there later this year as well. Next slide. We take our environmental and social and governance obligations very, very seriously. We have a good relationship with the local community, our stakeholders, including the Indigenous and the landholders in the region. Next slide. So just the key takeaways there. The copper price is up. Well, it's greater than this slide's about a week old. So I think it's great. It's more than 20% up in the last 12 months. So it's a great time to be in copper, of course. I see significant share price growth potential at Cooper Metals with over 50 targets for us to test just in Mount Isa area alone. We've got a busy exploration program for 2024. We've already done 4,000 metres of drilling this year up there. We'll be doing a lot of follow-up drilling through the year and commencing exploration in our Aurindi project near Cloncurry. We're well funded with over $4.4 million in the bank at the end of last quarter. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Great presentation. And as you say, copper price doing all the right things, and the project clearly rapidly advancing in the 2 years since you came to the ASX. Couple of very, very insightful questions from people who obviously know the business well. ESG and land access is becoming more important within the mining industry to maintain your license to operate, as you touched on a few slides ago. Could you provide some detail on what Cooper Metals is doing to manage access risk?
Sure. Look, I agree that ESG is becoming increasingly important, especially as our stakeholders become more informed, and there's a lot more competing land uses in the area, like wind farms, etc., and cattle farms, of course. There's a global trend here. We've heard from John about the recent mine that was shut down in Panama on environmental grounds. So, that's quite concerning. So we take that seriously. And I've seen juniors before lose their ability to do drilling as they've breached their conditions or environmental conditions. So I've had a lot of experience personally discovering and developing deposits in highly regulated areas, regional reserves in South Australia. Queensland has a very well-mapped pathway for explorers and miners. So as long as you stick to that pathway and follow the process, I think you can, there's no problem there. Also, we think communication is very important. We do have robust agreements with all our landowners and the Indigenous groups as well. So we work to those agreements, and we've been finding that actually Queensland is a great place to explore because the environmental regulations and also the Indigenous approval process works quite well with the explorers, because it is an area that has a rich mining heritage, and I think that the stakeholders are all quite used to working with miners and explorers in the area.
What about funding? Obviously, junior greenfields explorers, there is a challenge to make sure you've got the funds, which is seeing across the board a reduction in ground activity in the sector. How's Cooper placed for funding, and what do you need to do to meet the funding challenge?
Yeah, we're currently placed very well, and I think we saw from John's presentation that a lot of the micro caps were quite unloved in 2023. I will point out again that we did have $4.4 million in the bank at the end of the last quarter, so we're well funded. Queensland, again, is a great place to explore because they're very serious about their critical minerals. So we've recently got what they call a tenement rent holiday, which puts another $100,000 per annum that we would be paying on tenement rent. That is going into the ground instead. And at the end of this year, we will have received around $300,000 from the government in grants for geophysical surveys like V10 and a gravity survey that we're about to commence shortly. The other two board members in Cooper Metals have a long experience in capital markets and raising funds. We're very well supported by the Lao Resources Fund in Uwella, which has supported us through recent capital raises. So I think going forward, Cooper Metals is in really good shape to progress our exploration in the area.
Thanks, Ian. Well, Cooper Metals clearly advancing its copper assets in a systematic but efficient manner. We will look forward to following with interest. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, David.